Good yarning, everyone, and welcome back to Yarnaphilia. Today we're going to discuss how you can get started when your knitting journey for as little as $2.50 plus tax. So let's begin. Now, as we know, we've been to the Dollar Tree and we've been talking about these Dollar Tree yarns. And I thought I would take a look and see how you can get started with your journey for as low as possible. Now, Dollar Tree has yarns, as we discussed. They carry this brand, Premier Yarns, in a variety of different varieties, as you can see here, such as this one, Just Yarn Worsted. They had a tweed, active blend with polyester, as well as cotton, chenille, quite a nice variety. Check out my video on that so you can get a better, more in-depth view of their yarn. But what if you are thinking about getting started and you've got nothing? Not a crochet hook, not one knitting needle, not one scrap of yarn, and you also don't really have $50 to go to a fancy yarn store and get fancy needles, fancy yarn, or the patience to order something online. I got you. You can go to Dollar Tree and grab you a set of needles and some yarn, and for $2.50, you can get started. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, guys, so we have our knitting needles here. We are working with 5mm needles. Now, how do we know that's what we need? We looking at the yarn, and the yarn right there is going to tell us the size of knitting needle and crochet hook, which tends to be about the same for the type. So we know at the Dollar Tree we had 3 different options: 4.5, 5, and 5.5 millimeters. But for this project, we are going to use the 5mm, fresh out of the pack. And to get started with our yarn, we just pull out from the center, which is how I like to do it. I like to do center pull. And we're going to make our slip knot here. See, very simple. Make a loop, pull the yarn through the loop, and you got yourself a slip knot. Now, the yarn that's closest to the ball is called the working yarn, and the yarn at the end, the short bit's called the tail yarn. I'm going to put that loop on your hook, and you're going to use the working yarn. That's the part that's closest to the ball. You're going to loop it over your finger, like so, like so. Pull the needle through it. I'm going to do it a few times there for you, so you can see just how to cast on. This is the easiest method. Now, I made a mistake and did most of it off camera, which is why we had a little cut right there. But I'm showing you how to do it, right? You make a little loop and you kind of cast that loop on to the needle. And there you go. I made a few stitches for us. You want to keep them straight. Make sure they don't twist. You're going to push all of those stitches on the working needle. Or should I say the needle you're coming off of. You're going to push them towards the tip. You're going to pull out that second needle. And this is how we call entering knitwise, which is through the front. Like that, front to back. And giving you another angle there, front to back. That's how you're going to get your second needle in there. And then the way I like to do, which is what we call the English style, is I hold my working yarn in my right hand and I pull it from the back forward. What I just showed you there for a moment is you can put the yarn the other way from the front to the back. And you can actually even hold the yarn in your left hand, which is called continental knitting. It actually does not matter which direction you hold the yarn while you knit. What matters is that you're consistent about how you do it. So as an ultra beginner, I say let this project be an opportunity to take some time and figure out what is the best way for you. So I'm going extra slow here for you because you guys can see a couple of stitches. The key with this cast on method, it is the easiest cast on method, but most knitters don't really use it because, as you can see, it's a bit unstable. It's very easy to overdo it, to be too tight or too loose. So the real key with how you knit that first row, that foundation row, if you will, with this cast on method is to make sure you're not pulling too tight or going too loose. You almost always end up with a large bit of yarn in the middle, which It's fine when you only have 3 or 4 stitches, but today I cast on 30 stitches. And so it becomes a bit of an issue, and I'll show you how to deal with that in just a moment. But what we're going to do today is called the garter stitch scarf. Now, one ball of yarn is not enough to make a scarf, as we will see, but one ball of yarn is more than enough stitches to give you an opportunity to learn how to knit. So we are going to take you through that first row. We got a nice extra long bit of yarn in between there. So I'm going to show you what to do with it. It's a little awkward, but you can, with this cast on method, just cast on a few more stitches as you go. Since this is a basic garter stitch scarf, there's no pressure. You can drop stitches, you can add stitches. It does not really matter. It doesn't make a difference to the stitch or to the scarf. If you are working in a worsted weight yarn, you're going to want to make your scarf about 30-ish stitches, because for the most part you'll get to about 8 inches in width, which is scarf width, what we're looking for. Well, I did show you there. It's just while you're doing this project, focus on figuring out how to hold your yarn. You see, I have the yarn, the working yarn that is going through a few of my fingers. It's a way I maintain a bit of tension. Here we are at the end. What we're going to end up doing actually is just dropping off that last stitch, which was what the slip knot was. And that's because, as you see, we had a very long strip of yarn in between our stitches, which is the nature of this cast on method. So now that we're done, you're going to make sure you're going to pull your stitches taut to make sure you haven't twisted anything. This is very important, as for the first 2 rows, you can still possibly twist stitches. It's happened to the best of us. And if you twist a stitch, you got to start all the way over, or you're going to have a very weird looking bottom, which every now and then is what you want. There's a couple of techniques that do that, but 99.99% of the time you don't want twisted stitches. So you'll notice here on this second row, on every row after, now that you've worked that first row, the stitches actually move on the needle a bit more as you knit, right? There's no longer that one long piece of yarn in between, and because everything is connected and woven together, the stitches move. And so as you get more comfortable and you move a little faster, you may drop some stitches. So we're going to troubleshoot that in just a moment. But I wanted to show you what it looks like now in the second row. You're starting to see your work form a bit and develop. So I went ahead and knit a few more rows. So again, you can get a good idea of what the finished fabric is going to look like. I did a few more rows right then and there before I took a break and kind of came back to this. And I will say, though, you get what you pay for. And those little 250 needles, man, they're not fun. And you can see right there, I switched to my metal needles. I tried. I really did try to do this whole project on them $1.50, $1.25 needles for y'all, for those of us on a budget. And I've got to say, it is not worth it to struggle this much. Now, there's 2 things about straight needles in general why I always advise against using them if you know that you're going to be a knitter. 1, they tend to usually be too long. These are, I think, 14-inch needles for an 8-inch project. That's just too much needle. I didn't need all that. 2, as you can see, both needles got bent. Now, I never sat on them. I didn't let the baby play with them. I kept these needles safe. Somehow, both needles got bent, and that does impact your ability to work on a project. So, reason 1 for not liking single point needles, straight needles, is because they can be too long or too short for your project. You're now having to buy 3 or 4 or 5 pairs per size, which gets expensive. 2, fibers can snap or bend. Metal and plastic can bend. Wood can snap. I've seen it happen. And 3, of course, you can't do a lot of projects on them because they're not circular. Circular needles can be longer, and therefore you can do larger projects. But here I'm showing you, I basically finished off It is about 8 inches wide, as predicted, and it's 18 inches long. Now, if you really want to make a wearable garment, if you want to make a proper scarf, you're going to aim for 5 to 6 feet. So if we can all do a moment of math, if we have 18 inches from one ball of yarn and our goal is 72 inches, can I count? I think I said you needed 6 balls, but that's definitely not correct. I believe that's 4 balls of yarn total to make a proper scarf. But as I'm mentioning here, kind of, this yarn is not soft. I mean, it's yarn, it does the job. It's a good place to get yourself started. But acrylic in general is not going to be the warmest thing. This kind of acrylic isn't. It kind of feels like cotton. It feels scratchy and a bit rough. Is it unbearable? No. But do I really want to put that near my skin? No. Would I put that near a baby or a child? Absolutely not. So again, you're getting what you're paying for. Why I recommend a garter stitch scarf is so that you have something to wear, so you can feel proud of what you've done. But along the way, you're probably going to drop a stitch or two. So this is what I'm showing you what to do here. What do you do when you drop a stitch? First things first, keep a level head. Stay calm. Everyone drops stitches. We all do it all the time. Even with my fancy schmancy metal interchangeable needles, which I absolutely love. These are Adi squared interchangeable needle set. Highly recommend them. I drop stitches. I've been knitting for 25 years. I drop stitches all of the time. The key is to stay calm, get your hands in there, hold that stitch before it falls much lower than where it's gone. In this case, because the damage was pretty slight, I was able just to pick that stitch back up and put it on the needle. And then you kind of got to figure, kind of reverse engineer which direction that yarn is supposed to go over the needle, over your loop, to make sure that you don't end up with a too twisted or weird looking stitch. But again, this is your first time knitting, so your goal at this point is just to finish. Well, I don't have my first project because I tossed that piece of garbage out. It was maybe 40 stitches wide and ended up being 12 stitches wide. I'm not even exaggerating. So give yourself so much grace. Please do not let comparison steal your joy. Because if you compare yourself to someone who's been doing this for 25 out of just a few more than 25 years, you're going to get your feelings hurt. Now what I'm showing you here is what do you do when you drop a stitch and it's gone a few rows down. Well, you see how I've got my hand there holding it tight, holding my needle in a way to make sure no more stitches get dropped. And I'm just kind of reverse engineering, looking at my work and figuring out which direction do I gotta move the stitch versus the yarn to ensure that I can replicate what the other stitches were doing, so that when I pick up this stitch, it doesn't look too obvious. It is also worth noting that sometimes you're going to need a crochet hook to do this. Now this day, because it's worsted weight yarn, this yarn is highly visible, I was able to do it myself. And if you're working with a especially tight stitch, you may need a crochet hook or a hard to see yarn. Now here's another common thing we all do while we knit, and that is knit in the stitch below, or the row below, the one we're supposed to be in. So you see how instead of knitting the loop I'm supposed to knit, I knit the whole row beneath that. What do? Well, you stay calm. You can reverse engineer. So you can undo what you just did there. Get your incorrect stitch off of your working needle, that's your right hand needle, and get it back onto your left hand needle so you can undo that little bit of yarn that went into that stitch. So that's what I'm doing right now. My left hand needle, I'm going to go in there, pull out that working yarn, and then again I'm going to reverse engineer. It just becomes like if you had a drop stitch and make a repair. So the key here is just getting comfortable, but also paying attention at all times. You can never really stop paying attention, even if you're watching TV or whatever. Hopefully you all get to that point. You still got to pay attention. So I'm just going to undo this a little bit because I wanted to fix everything up. I finish off this row, and then we're going to get to binding off. And you'll see I had exactly enough yarn to do that. So that's always nice. Play a little yarn chicken and you win. So we're going to bind this off. I'll give you guys a little bit of a look again so you can see what it looks like to bind off. This Just Yarn Worsted by Premier Yarns, found at the Dollar Tree. Now you've seen me do this a few times by now, so we're going to do a little time lapse. Remember, it's just important, you guys, to stay focused, pay attention, be nice to yourself. Take your time. Now, if you didn't see how to bind off before and you're upset that I'm moving so fast right now, I will put a link to another video where I do a couple of bind off methods and move painfully slow. But I don't know about you, but I think these videos sometimes get a little painfully slow. So that's why I sped through that part. So now we are at the end. We got exactly enough yarn to finish. We're going to pull our yarn through. And there we go. That is what $1.50 worth of yarn will get you. You could make a hat out of this yarn if you knew how to make a hat. That's a bit more advanced of a technique, as we will save for another video. But you've got your fabric. I think that color is pretty nice. I just feel like this yarn should probably not be used for real use and just for learning purposes. Like today, I hope you learned. Can you let me know if you did this project, or do you already have some yarn in mind? Were you going to use a Dollar Tree yarn, or did you already have some yarn for your first project? As we can see, getting started doesn't have to be expensive. Now, of course, working with these yarns, with budget yarns and budget needles, are going to come with these drawbacks. These needles are plastic, they're thin, and they can only do so much. The yarn tends to rub up against them and catch, which in the beginning might be good since you're obviously going to be worried about dropping stitches. But as you get better at this, you're going to want a yarn that actually allows you to ease up on your tension and move your stitches more smoothly across. In addition, of course, you're going to, as you move up and as you spend more time with the craft, you may want to experiment on higher quality yarns. But this is a good way for someone to just get started. Whether you're a child, a crafter, somebody just figuring things out, just want to see you try your hand at it, why not get started here? Of course, generally speaking, I do caution against starting with the cheap stuff, as you can't really get rid of it if you don't want to, and you're going to have a lot of little problems that are not going to come with higher quality products. In addition, when it comes to knitting, I always recommend to get off of those straight needles as soon as possible and get you a set of circular needles. Better yet, let's get you a set of interchangeable circular needles, which will actually save you a lot of money in the long run. I'm going to do a video about that in the future, so make sure to subscribe and stick around for more content. And check out all my other videos and keep posted, as I'm going to be posting up more videos all about yarn, how to use it, knitting, and crochet techniques. So hang on, hang out, and thank you for checking out another Yarnaphilia video. Bye!